Hi, this is Joel Addis, and this is my case study response for EDL 852. So first we need to look at what the facts are in this situation. So there's a lot that's happened here. A community is growing and narrowly voted to build a new school. They hired an outside educator to serve as the principal of that school 12 months before it opened. The principal is now working with a committee to develop a vision statement for the school, amongst other things. And at this point, there's a disagreement between the principal and the committee members on how that should go. And an influential teacher has become the primary voice for a contrasting approach to the principals. And I think it's important to point out here that the principal and the teacher don't have different goals. They just have different ways that they want to reach their goals. So the order of events and where did these events occur? Small rural community that identified the need for additional educational spaces due to unexpected growth. The superintendent was presented with three options and advocated to build a new middle school, which was the most expensive option. And that divided the community into three groups. One feeling that no new building was needed, another that new builds were needed, just not the most expensive option, and then finally that the new middle school should be built. Excuse me. So then what's the order of events? Again, the community ended up debating these options for several months, and then the school board voted by a 4-1 vote. And it was approved by the community with a 53% vote in favor. And the build was going to take 18 months. There was a thorough hiring process, and a new principal was hired 12 months before the building opened. And the principal was given three broad tasks: make staffing decisions, organize the school programs, and coordinate construction. The staffing problem was solved easily. Most of the hires for the new building came from within the school district, and only 4 positions needed to be filled externally. So at that point, then the principal formed an advisory committee with input from the school board and the superintendent. It consisted of parents, teachers, and the principal. And then the principal presented the norms to the group. They did not develop them together. The group agreed to the norms, but disagreed with the principal's wish that she not be the committee chair. And so instead, an influential teacher was chosen as the chair, but with the understanding that the principal would assist. Those two then met, and the chair offered her unwavering support for the principal's leadership. The principal thanked the teacher and just replied that they needed to be focused on the committee's work. And then the committee started by developing a vision statement. The teacher, Mrs. Burke, is sister to a school board member, and shared that the school board member said that, they trusted the principal's leadership and they should just let the principal do it without input. And then at that point, the committee could just make sure it went through. The principal prefers a collaborative process and took that to the committee after resistance from the teacher. In the discussion, the PE teacher, Mr. Kelby, shared that he had some ideas, but he was worried that the conversation wouldn't get productive, nothing would get done. And 2 of the parents agreed with that. Ultimately, there was a democratic process, and the committee agreed with the teacher and voted that the principal would develop the vision statement alone. The vote was 7-1, with 1 individual abstaining. The only no vote was the principal. So at this point, who are the people involved in the school and what are their opinions? Our first is Ms. Potter, the new building principal, recently hired from an outside district, experienced educator, current assistant principal. She comes from a suburban area and was hesitant to come to a rural community. And I think that's a significant point when we're evaluating options later. She believes in collaborative leadership. I believe she is a diplomat. And she's excited for the challenge of creating a school from the ground up. She does not want to be an autocrat. And she would like to see the advisory committee create the vision statement collaboratively. Helen Burke is the advisory committee chair. She's a longtime member of the committee, and this is never explicitly stated, but it can be inferred given that her brother, who is on the school board, is a landowner and a farmer in the community. She is an English and social studies teacher, a strong advocate for building the new school. She was very supportive of Ms. Potter and her leadership to create a new middle school. It's also important to note that she was a reluctant chair of the committee, but again, she's enthusiastic about the building and work. She'd like Ms. Potter to generate the vision statement alone and then bring it to the committee for its approval. The other main party in the school building at this point is the advisory committee. Again, made up of 9 individuals. And the norms that Ms. Potter presented at the first meeting were that they be democratic, consensus preferred. The first task would be develop a vision statement. The vision statement would reflect the values of the committee and the community, and that all stakeholders would be given an opportunity to suggest elements of the vision and react to what was proposed by others. I've talked just a little bit ago about Mr. Kelby and how he supported sharing ideas, but then was concerned about how the conversation would go. And then finally, just the way that the vote went, and the fact that one parent voiced support for Ms. Potter's preference, but then ultimately it was a 7-1-1 vote. In the community, we're talking about Mr. Rawlings, the superintendent of schools. He's acknowledged the need for a new middle school, and he hired an architectural firm to examine the issue to manage controversy. This didn't work because controversy ensued due to the option proposed by the firm and the fact that it was the most expensive process. He interviewed Ms. Potter for the position as part of the hiring process and offered her the job. And then he has advised her on who to appoint to serve on the committee. And then also the school board. And I think this is important just because anytime you're looking at an issue that's going to impact a building and a community and a district, the school board is always going to be important. 2 of the board members are newer residents of the community with school-aged children. They have supported the new build. One is a farmer who supported the new build. One is a farmer who voted against the new build. And one is unknown, but it can be inferred that they are a resident who is not a farmer or a large landowner. So the other involved parties in the community would be Helen Burke's brother, who is a specific member of the board. He was the only farmer on the board who voted to support the new build, and he was instrumental in the decision to build the new school. And then we also need to talk about the community as a whole. They broke down into 3 subgroups regarding the school decision. Large landowners did not want any new construction. They acknowledged that there was a need for more space, but they did not want new debt until the current debt was paid off. There were residents who favored one of the lesser 2 options due to their smaller cost equaling a lower tax increase. And then new residents with school-aged children supported the new build and campaigned for it. And then ultimately, the community voted to approve the new build by a margin of 53 to 47%. So now it's important for us to look at the legal and ethical issues in the case. At this point, no one has been physically harmed in this situation. Really, the main harmful impact is going to be the relationships in the building, but then also Ms. Potter's standing as an influential school leader. At this point, I don't believe this situation breaks any existing laws. The conflict is stemming from different expectations for leadership. Was there a breach of contract? Given the specific situation given to us, I don't believe there's been a breach in contract. The only thing that I would just point out, if there is language in the district's negotiated agreement about how committees are organized, there would be a possible breach of the negotiated agreement. So now let's look and say in a single sentence, what is occurring? This is a long one, but a strong difference of opinion regarding the process for developing a school's vision plan has put a new administrator in the position of either having to lead in a way that conflicts with her personal approach or lead in a way that will alienate an influential group of stakeholders. So now we need to look at what we know and what we don't know. Sorry for continuing to drink. My throat is hurting. So in terms of the people, we know how Ms. Potter and Mrs. Burke feel the committee's work should be conducted. We know the expressed opinions of the advisory committee members. We know that some members of the committee are supportive of the approach, but might seem overwhelmed by the task. What we don't know is how, the committee members voted. And mainly, we don't know who abstained from the vote. And I think it would be helpful to know that, because if it would just be a piece that would help you know, okay, what did Mr. Kilby vote? Did he abstain, but then also express some support? Was it one of the parents? Is the person who abstained one of the parents? It just, I think, would be helpful in understanding how that all would work. So the place is Lightville Community School District. It includes communities that are primarily rural. It's approximately 60% of its resident lives on farms. The population of the district is increasing, though, because there's new residents coming from a major city 10 miles away. Most of these families have school-aged children, and there's an increase of enrollment. Over the last 25 years, the district has grown by 450 students and has a current growth rate of 2% per year. At this point, we know how the community factions feel about the new school. We know what members were influential in the process. And at this point, Mrs. Burke has told us what the community's expectations are, but not necessarily what they actually are. And so that's the first thing we don't know. We also don't know community values for a vision statement for the new school. In terms of the program, we know the middle school was controversial. We know it'll be a 6th to 8th grade attendance center designed to hold 450 students. We know the majority of the staff are transfers from current buildings in the district. We don't know the overall staff expectations for leadership. We don't know what, if any, current vision statements exist in the district. We also don't know curricular choices at the other two schools, or if there's an assigned curriculum series to the district. What are the priorities? This process could damage the community because the new middle school itself was controversial. And I think anytime you have something that goes into place that's controversial, if there's conflict involved, it could just further damage the view the community has over the item or issue. I think this is specifically important to note, given how connected Helen Burke is to the board, and then also how enmeshed she was in the process for getting the new school approved. So, who has an important stake in the outcome? Ms. Potter does, because of her position as a leader and ultimately her job in the district. Mrs. Burke is passionate about the new school, and also her position in the leader, as a leader in the building, could be compromised. Mr. Rawlings has a stake. He pushed through a controversial new build, and his position in the district could be compromised. And then finally, the BOE. They voted to approve the new build by a significantly higher margin than the community did. And so I think they have a stake in this, given that they are elected officials. So what else could I learn about this? I think it'd be helpful to know the overall staff and community expectations for school leadership, and you could get that from other administrators in the district. Same thing for existing vision and mission statements, and then also the values of stakeholders across the community to help inform what those statements should be. But do I have enough information? And yes, I have enough information to identify options, evaluate them, and then develop a plan to implement my decision. So, what are the options? The first option, I don't think it's a good one, but Ms. Potter just needs to back down and make a generic vision statement that aligns with her views, and the committee will provide some feedback, and it'll be approved. Option 2, I actually think is worse, and that would be to replace the entire committee and start again. And so option 3 would be reviewing norms with the current team and then constructing a vision statement using a defined process. And so this one specifically, Ms. Potter would maintain the same committee membership, but approach the duties in a different way. So, what are the pros and cons of each option? On option one, really the only pro is that the democratic process would be respected. I suppose you could also add as a pro that there will be a vision statement. The cons, Ms. Potter could become frustrated and leave the community in her position. She has no ties to the community. And that's okay. I'm not saying that you should only hire from within a community, but I think it needs to be acknowledged that there's not anything holding her there other than this job. It creates a scenario where Mrs. Burke would feel she has undue influence on school decisions outside of her control. So what would happen if there's a concern with evaluations or another teacher in the building? Will this empower Mrs. Burke in a way that is not appropriate? And the other piece is the vision statement would not align with the values of the broader community and then could alienate stakeholders. And as I've said before, I think that would be not good. So the pros in replacing the committee, again, I think this is actually the worst out of these two first options, is that Ms. Potter begins again with a new advisory committee and she has a chance to set new norms. She's wiping the slate clean and she's starting fresh. The cons, the superintendent helped her pick these people, so it would probably alienate him. It would alienate the current members of the committee and possibly the whole staff. And given that the committee is also parents, it could alienate the parents. And then that's also considering Mrs. Burke's brother being part of the BOE. So when we look at the third one, pros would be to provide a chance to create norms collaboratively as a group. It would allow for both of the individuals' preferences to be valued while moving forward in an alternate process. I feel right now they are just locked against each other, and they're pressing their preferred paths are just stuck, pushing against each other. And so I think if they can both turn and just move in a separate way together, that's the best option. It does offer a chance to incorporate more community feedback into the process. The cons, I think this is a difficult option to navigate, but I do think it's the right one because you could still get consistent pushback from educators, and also you could still alienate people along the way. But I think that it's preferable to alienate people under this option because I believe you're acting in a more ethical manner. So after reflecting, I've already done this. We're going to work on option 3. So we're going to implement the decision and decide what our plan of action is. So the first, we need to develop a process to create the vision statement. We're going to create, and really just looking at the first one, I actually pulled this from my first presentation for this course. So just looking at number 1 and developing, create a timeline. We're going to gather input, work with school leaders on drafts, present the draft to all staff, discuss and revise, share the vision and mission with all stakeholders, and then just really look through the rest of those, which will go on later in the process. The next step is to communicate. And I think the most important person to communicate with is Mrs. Burke. Need to talk about, just have an honest conversation. I think that honest conversations and hard conversations, as long as both people have the same goal, can create the most beneficial working relationships. And like I've said, Mrs. Burke and Ms. Potter have the same goal. They want to have a fantastic middle school. They're enthusiastic about it. They care deeply about it. They just have different views of how to get there right now. So I think it's good to talk about what happened at the previous meeting and talk about the norms that the group agreed upon and how what happened doesn't necessarily reflect those norms. And then I think it's also important, though, to acknowledge, for Ms. Potter to acknowledge, I'm going to work on this vision statement process and I'm going to share it at the next committee meeting. And I think it's important for me, I would go ahead and acknowledge the democratic outcome but start working on a process in a way that I would prefer. And I know that that's kind of hedging and not really, saying I'm going to do it by myself, but I'm saying that I respect the vote. So you're going to have, you want me to just do it. Well, this is how I'm going to do it. I would not say it in that way though. So the next thing is I would communicate with the superintendent, inform him what's happened, but more just kind of an update and as a way to ask for examples of vision and mission statements for the schools and the district. And then I want to communicate with the committee. I want to let them know we're going to have another meeting. And then I'm going to share an agenda as well as information about developing team norms collaboratively. And there's a list here. Unfortunately, can I move myself over? There we go. I did not mean to hide part of that. Just that the norms will focus on what the team will do, not what it won't. They'll be focused on positive action, set parameters for team meetings, create a higher likelihood of success, full collaboration. They should be open to being revised in a collaborative way, encourage accountability, and use data and facts when making those determinations. And then the last thing I would do is I'd collaborate with Mrs. Burke to just let her know that as a chair and principal, we'd meet afterwards and plan for the next meeting. So that comes to step 3, which is reconvening the committee. We need to call the advisory committee back together. We're going to review the group norms, but then establish new norms collaboratively, following those guidelines. And then I would share the process I've developed for creating the vision statement, share the timeline, and invite others to join me in community forums. And at this point, I would share research showing why it's important to have a vision statement be reflective of the values in the community. We'd also discuss other duties that can be undertaken by the committee, because the committee still needs to work. It still needs to have purpose. And there are other things it can do during this time. So they can start looking at organizing the school's programs, the scope of the curriculum, extracurricular programs and instructional approaches, and then also collaborating in terms of just looking at options for attending progress meetings, but also equipment and furniture acquisitions. And so I think this is where you can tie into what's happening in other buildings in the district and have those committee members go and see what do the other schools have, what curriculum are they using, what extracurricular programs do they have, and how can those be adapted then into a middle school setting. Afterwards, go ahead and meet again with Helen, and I just review the meeting, and I just would touch base with her and see how she was feeling, and then talk about how the plan would allow you to bring a vision statement option forward for the committee to review as a draft. And I think it's important here to note that Helen Burke did not want to be the committee chair, and Ms. Potter did not want to be the committee chair. And so you've got a principal I didn't want to be the committee chair. And so I put that on someone who didn't want it. And I think it's important to acknowledge that and truly just work together as co-chairs instead of saying, well, you're the chair because of symbolic meaning, and just say, we're going to do this together because we have the same goal and we just can meld our approaches together for the best path forward. Next step is to execute the process. And at this point, interested members of the committee, and I'm really thinking specifically of the parent who voiced support of Ms. Potter's approach. I think Mrs. Burke with her, even though she didn't agree with the committee just generating something out of thin air, and neither did Mr. Kelby, I think they would be interested in doing this. So contact the superintendent and other principals to get examples of vision statements. Gather stakeholder input from across the community through a community forum and a survey. And make sure the survey is distributed in several ways so that the community is represented. Could work to identify themes in the feedback and then create drafts with interested members of the committee. So next, it's time to reconvene the committee. We would start by reviewing our norms. Then we look at the information from the forums and drafts of the visions statement with the committee, allow time for feedback, and then move on to the other items in the agenda. Afterwards, meet back again with Helen as more of a co-chair role to review the meeting, talk about other items on the agenda, and then the plan to bring the statement to the full staff. So the next pieces would be to meet with the staff as a whole. present the draft of the vision statement, offer a chance for feedback, break out into small groups, and that might involve reconvening the committee. And then also then sharing that vision with the stakeholders. And again, through different methods. So finally, it's important to follow up. And at the next committee meeting, we need to review the established norms, follow up on the finalized vision statement, and then move forward with other items on the agenda. So I really like this option. I think it's the best path forward because it creates an alternate path than what either individual wanted. So it respects both of their approaches, I feel, but it also allows for community feedback in creating the vision statement. I think it's important that they reviewed and reestablished the norms because it allowed them to all have ownership of them as they move forward. With that, I thank you for watching this presentation.